What's going on, Steelers Nation? Hopefully, you guys had a good weekend and a stress-free Steelers Sunday. Big podcast type episode today. We're going to be doing our midseason check-in, just going over a lot of different topics, kind of as we head to the second half of the season. I want to talk about what I'm most excited about with the team, what I'm most curious about, and then what concerns me the most. And then we're going to talk through some stock up, stock down, like we did after the first quarter of the season, just for players at the midway point that are either meeting expectations or, failing to meet those. And then we'll kind of wrap up with a quick discussion about some potential wide receiver targets as the trade deadline approaches. I think by the time I'm recording this right now, we're officially less than 24 hours away from the deadline. So a lot of stuff going to be popping off this week. Just a quick reminder, there is an NFL draft primer with a very special guest of mine that will be dropping midweek, either tomorrow or Wednesday. I'm really jacked up for that. I've spent most of the weekend just watching film on some college prospects that I haven't gotten to see so far this season. And there's going to be a lot of fun discussions with that. So I'm excited about my guest too. He's a really good dude. So, and then Friday I'll be going live just for a little Q&A hangout, talk some ball. So you guys want in on that, be sure to, hit the bell. Then of course, we'll have the Commanders preview up on Saturday per usual. Now that we're back into the swing of things coming off the bye week, just do me a favor. If you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell to be notified when I go live or drop new content. Also, if there's someone that you're wanting my thoughts on for draft purposes, let me know in the comments as well, because that name may come up as we talk about some of the NFL draft guys in the midweek show. So, and also just let me know what you guys think of this style of video. If you want more type of content like this, it's always good feedback and I really appreciate it. So let's ride. What I'm most excited about with the Steelers have a solid offense, and I'm pretty excited about that, especially as a film guy. Being able to kind of break down film and just watch a competent offense has been a really nice change of pace for me. Right now, the Steelers 13th in EPA per play, 18th in success rate, 14th in points per drive. It's pretty good, man. Honestly, I thought this offense had a chance to be decent. But, full disclosure, I thought it was going to take longer for them to get up to speed. You got two new quarterbacks coming in, a young offensive line that's, still gelling. And it's been a little bit of a revolving door due to some injuries and things like that. But, and then weapons. I think a lot of people had questions about the weapons on offense, if it was going to be good enough. But, Arthur Smith, he hasn't been perfect, man. But they have an identity on offense for what I feel like is honestly the first time in a long time. They want to run the ball a lot. I think he's done some nice things in terms of making some notable adjustments to kind of fit his scheme to the personnel that he has. And that's a big part of why they're humming, coming off the bye week. Hopefully they can sustain that momentum. But I really just enjoy what the offense looks like right now. You have a good feel for what they're actually trying to do. I think he's had some really good play calls and some really good game plans in recent weeks. And, putting up 30 points a couple times already this season, it's just been nice to see them move the ball at a consistent clip. And I'm intrigued by, where this thing is going to go. And kind of leads me into my next point. What am I most curious about? I think that, is this style of play sustainable? I think starting with Russell Wilson, when the Steelers signed him in the offseason, I thought this is a guy that they could still win some games with. But personally, just what we saw out of Justin Fields over the first 5 weeks, I didn't think that they should bench Justin, just because I didn't think the trade-off would necessarily be worth it. Basically swapping out Justin's legs for, what Russ could potentially have as a passer, based on what we had seen in the previous couple seasons with him in Denver, whatever. But as of right now, Mike Tomlin looks correct in his assumption to, go with Russ, and full credit to him. Like he says, that's why he's highly compensated. I said this a little bit in the post game for the Giants game as well, but I thought that Russ threw it better in that game than any that I've seen him play in, really since before the finger injury with I think it was his last year in Seattle, 2021 maybe. But you just look at some of the throws that he had on tape, man. That throw, I keep bringing it up, but the pylon throw to George Pickens on that route, absolutely, it's a seed, man. It's a 45-yard ball on a line over the corner, away from the safety, hits Pickens in stride to where he's actually able to turn upfield a little bit after on the sideline. And, there were just some high leverage plays that I think he made in that game as well. The cover zero shot to Calvin Austin, just being really thoughtful about how he's attacking defenses. If teams want to live in cover zero, a good way to take advantage of that is try to beat them over the top. The defensive backs are expecting the ball to come out quickly. He's chucking the ball down the field, brings Pat Freiermuth into the protection plan, gives him enough time. And like I said, I think that, early in the off season, and once we kind of got to breaking down some of Smith's scheme on the channel, I remember saying, this needs to be a highly efficient rushing attack, and it needs to be an explosive passing attack to kind of complement one another. And I think that everything, the way that the concepts work off each other right now, it's like it feels like a perfect marriage. And I think that Smith's actually getting more out of his scheme than I may have even anticipated. So props to, the offense. I'm just curious, like, because I said, it's only been 2 games of Russ. I thought he was much better against the Giants than he was necessarily against the Jets. I just want to see, like, can he keep up this level of play? Like, that's my big question. And like, what does this look like as, we go through the season and opposing teams have more film on like what they're trying to do is this sustainable? And then like, are they going to have counters once opposing teams start to counter what they're doing? So, and then defensively, I think they've obviously been a really good unit so far. If you just look at the numbers, they stand out in a really positive way. 6th in EPA per play, 10th in success rate. I think they're 3rd in points per drive as well. So those are all really good. I think it's also fair to acknowledge that they've faced an incredibly easy schedule thus far, pretty much devoid of good quarterback play. Teams have moved the ball on them a little bit in stretches. I know a lot of people are really concerned about the way that the Giants move the ball on Monday Night Football, especially on the ground, but they have been the league's best defense in the red zone, and they forced a ton of turnovers. And I think that sometimes, the way that turnovers and stuff gets talked about in the media, is that stuff sustainable? Can you count on them on a week-to-week basis? I think those discussions are fair to an extent, but I also think that, not every team has TJ Watt. And I think that the way that Watt consistently rises to the occasion, late in the fourth quarter, in those gotta have it type of moments, those strip sacks. I mean, there's nobody better at the sport than him at those. Now, do I think that some of the turnovers they've gotten have been, maybe good luck? Sure. But I don't think it's going to necessarily regress all the way to, it's going to not just going to completely drop out. I'll say that. But I just want to see, is this kind of sustainable? Like once they get, like, is their scheme and everything sustainable once they start seeing good quarterback play? They're near the bottom of the league in blitz rate, not being super exotic on the back end, not doing a ton of like pre-snap or post-snap rotations to disguise thing. It's very vanilla. I'm interested to see, does that change? Is that a sustainable approach in today's NFL? Are they just going to have so much talent on that side of the ball that they're going to be able to whoop people with their dudes? We'll see. But like I said, I think, you look at the schedule coming out of the bye, they get Lamar Jackson twice. They played pretty well against him in the past. They get Joe Burrow twice, right out of the bye, Jaden Daniels. And then later in the season, Patrick Mahomes on Christmas. So they're going to face a lot better offenses, a lot better teams than the ones that they played thus far. And I'm just excited to see, how legit this defense is. I think they're definitely a good unit. I would be surprised if they were worse than that, but I'm curious if this could potentially be a great unit, and we'll see. Getting some guys back healthy. Alex Highsmith in particular has been fantastic the last 2 weeks. So he certainly helps. Teams want to slide the protection, give a bunch of help to TJ's side. He needs to be able to take advantage of those one-on-ones, and that's why they're paying him. And I think for the most part, the last 2 weeks, he's done those. Hopefully the continuity on defense continues to get better as the weeks kind of go on. And then, I would say like what I'm most concerned about, like as we sit here today, are the Steelers going to have enough firepower, once we get into the postseason? I think, this is a stat that I've tweeted out a couple times. It was something that I researched pretty heavily in the offseason, but for an article that I did for Steelers Now. But since 2018, 22 of the 24 championship teams have been top 10 in EPA per play. The 2 exceptions were last year's Chiefs and the 2021 Bengals. Both of those teams finished 11th. So basically, you have to have a good to very good offense to be considered a contender. I already mentioned that the Steelers are 13th right now, so that's good. Like I said, can we sustain that? Can we improve on that as the season goes on? We'll see. But in today's NFL, you pretty much have to be a good offense to be considered a contender. Like I said, those were the championship teams, so AFC, NFC championship game participants. I just have a feeling in the back of my head that tells me their hesitancy to add another weapon, really dating back to the spring, through the summer, and into the season, is going to loom pretty large when the Steelers hopefully reach the postseason. I think that we talked about, is it's a good or a great defense? Even like really good defenses, you still have to be able to put up points in the postseason. Like it just is what it is. I think, normally when I, go on like podcast appearances or just talk ball with like people, I think with like smarter people than I am, I think the number one thing that comes up a lot, he's like the formula to winning in the postseason. Like, what is it? And I always think of it as, do you have the right quarterback? And then can you get home on the defensive end with 4? So like your pass rush and your quarterback. I think those two are like main ingredients to being a contending type of team in the playoffs. And, I think the Steelers definitely have the pass rush. They got the talent to do it. We'll see. Like I said, I want to see the quarterback play. Is this sustainable? But Russ has played in a bunch of big games. I think that experience is going to be pretty valuable. We've seen a drop in, I would say, like operational errors, pre-snap and things like that since he's been in the lineup. And hopefully, like if he continues to play at the level that he's played at. I think I'm going to be pretty excited about that. But I think if he continues to play well, the defense sustains their level of play versus better offenses. I'm very close to putting some very real expectations on this team for the first time in quite some time, to be honest with you. If you guys have followed me for a long time on social media, or obviously sub to the channel, you all know that I'm pretty objective with the way that I think about the game and everything like that. So I try to not over, I guess, exaggerate, how good this team could potentially be. But I really do. I think that this is a pretty solid team, potentially even a good team, and maybe a team that could potentially win in the playoffs. I think I'll have the answer to whether I think that they can do that here in the next couple of weeks, just as they, continue to play better teams as the schedule kind of rolls on. And like I said, we'll talk about some trade deadline stuff because I know, they haven't made a move up to this recording, but we'll talk about some trade deadline stuff later in the video in terms of just my quick hitter thoughts on a bunch of the rumored guys that could potentially be available. But I do want to talk through some guys that have improved their stock really since we did one of these podcasts, I think after the first month of the season or so. Full transparency, I kind of wanted to shine a light on some maybe players that haven't got enough attention, maybe guys that I haven't been able to dive into my thoughts on recently, just on the channel or in other formats. So as much as I would love to sit here and gush about how exciting it is to watch Darnell Washington play, we talked about Darnell Washington last time. So I'm not going to rehash a bunch of the stuff I said, even though I am encouraged by some of the stuff that they've done in the passing game with him, really utilizing him better on some crossers, on some flats, really get him some yak opportunities. But I'm not just going to sit here and talk about how fun it is to have an inline blocking tight end. It's something that the rest of the league wishes they had, and the Steelers do have it. But I want to talk about some other guys. So first and foremost, Calvin Austin, a legitimate NFL receiver, I'm pretty sure. I think that just over the past 6 weeks, you look at Austin's box score, and it's really nothing super impressive, right? He's combined for 6 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. For a guy that's playing as much as he is, you're okay, why are we so excited about this guy? But I think there's some real improvements, man, as a route runner. I think he looks a lot more comfortable, obviously pushing off that foot, was dealing with that injury last year. There was just watching his film last year, it just was not good. Obviously the production was extremely bad. You just look at any metric that you want to look at, yards per route run, anything like that. If you're a PFF grade guy, anything. The results just weren't good. He was a net negative last year when he was on the field on offense, and that just has not been the case this year. It's complete opposite. I think he's actually been a positive player for them, especially recently. Looks so much quicker in and out of his breaks, man. His ability to decelerate has been better. He's coming out of breaks extremely quickly. I think that he's added some route running nuance to his game in terms of how to set defenders up. They're utilizing him really well too, as a guy that can stretch the field, not just vertically, because we know he has that 4.3 speed. Which is kind of a perfect marriage to the quarterback play they got on the roster, but also to stretch the field horizontally. He's running a lot of crossers. And then, it's important to note too, I kind of brought this up recently as well, but, Austin's been getting open on film. If you go watch, even when the plays aren't necessarily designed to go his way, whether he's on the backside of the progression or the ball just doesn't find him, he's been getting open. And I think that that's really encouraging for a team that really needs another guy to step up against man coverage. And I think that Calvin's really been able to provide them a spark. And obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Giants game, right? Just because, he has a touchdown grab in the fourth quarter shortly after. That punt return touchdown really changed the game. I think it's a tie ball game at that point. But just a massive play. And whenever your role players are stepping up like that and being able to contribute to winning, I think that that's really encouraging. And the best way that I can explain it is I think that there are obviously some limitations in terms of what Calvin can be in the future, just because he does have the size limitations. He's not going to have this huge catch radius. He's going to have to be fairly open in order to get him the ball. Sometimes he's not going to be able to do everything you would want your ideal slot receiver to do, but he's a good matchup player. If you want to take some shots down the field, try to create some explosive plays, the entire NFL is searching for ways to get explosive right now. And Calvin's a guy that I think they can create those plays. So hopefully the ball starts finding him a little bit more. And I think that I'm optimistic that it will, especially if they don't make a noticeable move at receiver. But I definitely wanted to give him a shout out just because I think that the way he's played this season, heading into the year, I would have probably said that I wasn't sure if he was actually an NFL player, even though I did like Austin a little bit coming out of college, out of Memphis. I thought that he was a potential wide receiver 4 type. I wasn't really sure if we were even going to get that, to be honest with you, after his film last year, but I'm fairly certain that he's at least that right now. So it's encouraging stuff for sure. Next guy I want to talk about, Najee Harris has had a monster month, like just an absolute monster month. Najee's went over the century mark 3 straight times. First time in his career that he's had 3 straight 100-yard games. It does coincide with, I think, the Steelers' offensive line playing better football. They've made some schematic tweaks, a little bit more inside zone, a little bit more gap, but still heavy outside zone stuff. But this is the best that we've seen him run the rock since the Bama days. I've tweeted out some clips just in the past couple of weeks explaining why I think that is. But I think you look at the numbers and they kind of back up that claim too. Just from weeks 6 through 8, these numbers are from Pro Football Focus. He's forced 21 missed tackles. That's second among running backs in the NFL, behind only Pittsburgh's own James Conner. Even more impressive, though, he's averaging nearly 4.5 yards after contact per rush. So, that's what I'm saying. If a run is blocked for 3 to 4 yards, Najee's getting 6 or 7, almost every single time. The way that he is creating for himself, making guys miss in the open field. He's hurdling guys. He's consistently falling forward like you would expect for a 235-pound back. And, something I wrote about, a couple of weeks ago too, I also think he's pretty clearly the closer on this team. You look at the way that he's closed out some of these games in recent weeks, just feeding him the ball in the fourth quarter. As those defenses get tired and you start to really impose your will after running the ball 30-something times or whatever, moving the ball, those defenders don't really want to tackle 235-pound backs late in the fourth quarter like that. He can wear teams down in that fashion. I've just been really encouraged by how I've seen him play. I think the vision, I know a lot of complaints and really concerns coming into the season were about how he would handle this new one-cut running system with the outside zone stuff. But I think his vision's been extremely impressive, man. He's had multiple really good runs where he's setting up defenders in the hole, having a really nice a jump step into a different hole to get a good amount of yards. And then, there's even some of his worst runs. I honestly think it's pretty evident to see who messed up in the blocking unit, where somebody misses a block or things like that. But there have been very few runs this year where I've looked at and said oh yeah, he needed to get more yards than he got right there. And I think that's usually the trait of a pretty solid back. Obviously, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. What does that mean going forward? I don't think that Najee's going to be here next year just because I think he's, if they wanted him here and they thought that he was, a foundational piece, they would have just picked up his 5th-year option. It was $6 million or something like that on the cap. I think the way that he's playing right now, you look at the season that he's having and just the counting totals that he's going to take into free agency, he's going to probably get more than that on a per year basis. And somebody's definitely going to give him more than 1 year. He's probably going to be looking at a 3-year deal or something like that. So I don't think they're going to be able to keep him. But, all in all, the most important thing right now that we're worried about is this season. He's playing extremely good ball. He's making himself money, which I think, in terms of compensation down the line and things like that, that could help the Steelers as well. But he's been a really good player. I know Jaylen Warren's been banged up a little bit this season, but outside of the occasional drop on a check down pass, Najee's played extremely well, and I wanted to highlight that in particular. So next guy I want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball, Beanie Bishop. So after the Dallas game, if you guys remember, if you're members to the channel, I did a all 22 breakdown on that, but I was pretty concerned about where we were headed into the second stretch of the season with Beanie Bishop in the lineup. A common thing that I was seeing on film was he wasn't getting enough depth in his zone drops, just didn't have a really good feel for those zone assignments. But those mishaps over the past several weeks have been less prevalent, I'll say. And I think it could be a multitude of different things. But, it's easy to forget, this dude, he played a lot of ball in his college career. He was, I think, a 5th-year senior, started a bunch of games. But he is a rookie, and he's an undrafted rookie at that. So for him to be able to show strides in the first half of the season, I think is encouraging. And really dating back to the Vegas game, I think there's been some really nice moments. Their last couple opponents in particular have had some really nice slot capable guys. The Jets, they would kind of occasionally motion in Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, of course, new to the roster at that point. But even the Giants, they got Wan'Dale Robinson in there. They'll sometimes put Malik Neighbors in there as well. But just the fact that he wasn't picked on in those matchups was pretty encouraging about Book, because that's kind of one of the ways that I was anticipating teams to kind of pick at this defense a little bit. That just hasn't been the case over the past several weeks, at least. Of course, the interception off Aaron Rodgers in Tampa 2 was absolutely awesome. Almost baited a future Hall of Famer, first ballot Hall of Famer, into a ill-advised throw. That was fantastic. Only 2 missed tackles on the season as well, which is ideally what you want from your slot. That guy sometimes has to be more involved in the run fits and things like that. But I have no idea what this means going forward, to be honest with you. Does he split time with Cam Sutton, who's officially been reinstated off suspension? Is it a timeshare? Does Sutton have to kind of wait for him to slip up to get back in the lineup? Do they just hand Sutton the keys? All in all, I think that these are really good problems to have if you're the Steelers, having all of these different options available to you off the bench. Like even a guy like Corey Trice coming off. We know that the team's been high on him. He's just had a lot of issues staying healthy. But Terrell Edmonds has come in, played a lot of dime snaps for them. You've got a bunch of guys and like Edmonds and Sutton and these guys that have been in this defensive scheme for quite a while now. And then I think just having those guys as options for you is massive. So I think that these are good problems to have. Not every team is fortunate enough to be headed into the second half of the season with a reasonable bill of health, but also guys on the bench that could potentially come in and contribute, or at least not get completely exposed in matchups. So I think that kudos to Beanie Bishop, who I think has been playing a little bit better ball. Last one that I want to kind of talk about for stock up guys. Dan Moore Jr., pretty much everybody wrote this dude off, right? Like he's had small stretches in the past where he's looked like a solid tackle, but he was never really, through the first 3 years of his career, was never really able to string those moments together over a large sample size. But I think through 8 games, he's been very solid, man. Only 2 sacks and 14 pressures allowed through 8 games, man. That's really nice work for a left tackle. He's been even better, in my opinion, in the run game. Has some really nice moments, generating significant displacement on the backside of double teams, things like that. They like running in his direction as well. And I just think that even though it's worth noting that I think that Smith's scheme is very offensive tackle friendly with all the close formations, the tight splits, the play action, the lack of like true drop back passing sets that you have to actually execute. This dude's made him a bunch of money throughout the season, man. I think that this was an outcome that honestly I didn't see coming. I thought that he would Smith would make them look better than they actually are, but this is completely different. This is like him showing like legitimate improvement. I think if you even go back and look at the Giants game last week, he had some nice moments where he was left on an island with a guy like Brian Burns, somebody that I think is a pretty good pass rusher. And in the past, I would have thought that Burns would have probably given him the business, and that just didn't happen in those couple moments. So, I've seen tackles in this kind of quote unquote tier in free agency get overpaid. And if this level of play continues to the second half of the season, this is where I think he's headed, man. And good for him. I don't really know that it's in the cards for him to return as a Steeler next year. Of course, they drafted back-to-back first-round tackles, one of which we're going to talk about here in a second. So I don't know if they're going to be willing to pay up for a guy like this to return. But he seems like a great teammate. He's been very helpful in terms of just getting, offering advice and things like that to the young tackles. He deserves, praise, especially when you consider some of the struggles on the other side. And, just kind of moving on to a couple stock down guys. Not a ton of, there were some other guys that I probably could have put in here, but they were more so bad games more than bad stretches. And even one of those, I was cautioned against saying bad stretches. But, I know we said we wouldn't be talking about guys we hit on the last time around, but I feel like the right tackle situation really has to be discussed. I see a lot of people in the comments on my videos, like consistently talking about Broderick, like, what's going on? Could you break down like exactly what's going on with him and anything like that? But, it's too important of position, and the Steelers have, such a big investment in Jones, trading into the top 15 for this guy. But I want to talk about, his struggles. But just before we talk about specific instances, Pro Football Focus has a metric. It's pass blocking efficiency, which basically combines your pressures and your sacks. It's weighted more so towards sacks. But he ranks 65 out of 78 among tackles who have played 20% of their team snaps this season. Obviously, that's just not good enough. Not just in terms of a first-round pick, but just like what you're looking for out of your starting right tackle. Was writing about the 2023 draft class for Steelers now in an article that'll probably be released in the morning. But here's a couple notes that I had written down for things that just popped up multiple times per game. I went back and watched about 3 to 4 games just of his sets in pass protection, just to kind of see like exactly what was going on. How was he losing? Crosses his feet in pass protection, bending at the waist after two-hand lunging, improper strike timing and placement, and gives up his chest in pass pro. All of these things are like considerable things. Some of these were evident at Georgia. Guys just weren't really able to take advantage of that because he was kind of just out-athleting everybody. But we knew that Broderick was going to be a project as a pass blocker. But I think, honestly, for me personally, the lack of impact in the run game is just completely bizarre. I think that you kind of always knew that this dude was going to be a 3-year kind of project. He was pretty raw with his hands. You were thinking, okay, if we can but when we enter year 3, if we can say that this dude's trending in the right direction and he's able to give us some impact in the run game, we'll live with some of the struggles in pass pro. And I don't think that we're getting the flashes at all in the run game even. It's really bizarre, but he basically has no pop in his hands. The power and the play strength that we saw at Georgia, man, it's just, it's noticeably absent in his game. Like he just doesn't move people off the spot. You look at like when he gets engaged with blocks, it almost looks like he doesn't want to or doesn't know how to use his hands at all. He falls off blocks consistently in the run game, almost on contact, mainly because like other issues like poor pad level. There are times where his hands are way too wide and he just gets easily discarded. His base consistently gets real narrow. Like he'll have his feet almost on top of each other when he's trying to drive guys, and it's like defenders are easily going to fall off the block at that point. So like the fact that he hasn't even been like an average run blocker this season is more alarming to me because I was, like I said, my expectation was that he was going to struggle in pass pro, but I thought even last season, like he had some flashes in the run game. It wasn't necessarily overly consistent, but the flashes were there. It just makes me like curious about what in the world's going on. Like, I don't know. Part of me wants to think that that this is a potential, like maybe the elbow thing, like is just something that he's still dealing with. He's not wearing the brace. And, we could do the speculation game and like nobody's 100%, right? Once you get into the season, I don't know what percent he's playing that. I want to have some empathy towards that situation, man. But like, it's particularly alarming for sure when you get to this point in a player, midway through a player's second season. I don't know in terms of like what that means going forward. Like my expectations right now is like we need to just like forget about the fact that this dude is a first round pick. We need him to get back to playing like acceptable, like baseline starter level tackle. If he does that through the rest of the season, at least you can say like, okay, like we're back at least on the track, on sort of on trajectory to where we kind of not necessarily where we need to be, but something that she could work with. Because I think if this level of play continues through the rest of the season, it's going to make for some really interesting and tough discussions about things that are going to need to happen and some contingency plans that are probably going to need to be put into place if he can't, at least show the team that he's a starting capable tackle. And I know a lot of people are going to say like, well, he's playing on the wrong side and everything else. Like, I hear you. The Steelers drafted 2 left tackles. One of them is going to play on the wrong side. It just is what it is. But I don't think that there's almost 0% of his film that I would look at and say like, hey, like this would probably look better on the left side. I just me personally. Obviously, there's no way to necessarily prove that, but it's pretty rough right now. Next guy that I want to talk about, kind of the last guy that I want to talk about, stock down, and this hurts. And I want to preface this by saying these are my expectations, not necessarily like fan base's expectations or media expectations or anything like that. But this one hurts my soul, honestly, because if you're fans of the channel or read anything that I've written over the past, 2 years or so, you know that I admire Keanu Benton's game. I don't think he's been bad at all, but just my expectations were set for a year 2 breakout, and that just hasn't happened, man. And I'm really disappointed. And I've went back and watched the film, and I'm trying to figure out why it isn't happening. The advanced metrics as a pass rusher still look pretty good. Pass rush run rate is good. Like, he's not getting home consistently enough, but like I think his best reps look great. But his pass rush repertoire really hasn't expanded. He's still kind of spamming that club swim move. And I think that it's definitely on the scouting report, and offensive, guards and centers alike have kind of adjusted to that, to where he's only having 1 or 2 like really, really high quality wins like per game. And it's just not enough, especially like when that's like your specialty, I would say. So just want to see him register a little bit more production on a more consistent basis as a pass rusher. But, the run game is where I'm kind of continually, I would say, like confounded or like scratching my head, honestly. Really where he's at his best is like where he's allowed to just see ball, go get ball, just kind of see the ball, go fire off the ball. It doesn't necessarily have like the world's quickest first step, but he can't get off the rock, especially if he times the snap pretty well. But he just struggles versus double teams, man. Like, in particular, like the pad level is a little bit concerning. You can just tell that he doesn't necessarily have like the sand in his pants to kind of settle in and anchor versus double teams against like gap runs. Kind of makes me a little bit nervous, because of some of the teams that they've got on the schedule coming up too. Like Washington in particular runs a lot of gap runs, especially out of heavy personnel. So he's going to be in the game. So like you don't have to look very far to see Benton on film, and he's getting pushed or displaced like 1 to 2 gaps over. And like, that's a little bit concerning for me as a true nose tackle. Now, like, where does this leave us going forward? It's something that I've said really dating back to, probably some like OGs in here may remember, but like when I used to do Steelers draft talk with Nick Martin for All Steelers, when we talked about Benton, both of us were like pretty big fans of like his game. And obviously there was a lot of smoke around the Steelers potentially selecting him. But, we both said like, this dude's playing nose tackle, he's playing zero tech, but like we think he could be even better as a 3 tech. And I still believe that, man. Like, I just think if you watch his best reps, like he looks like a 3 tech to me. And I know that he's playing there. well, I don't want to say I know he's playing there out of necessity. I feel like right now you may have to play him there out of necessity because I don't have like another nose tackle guy you feel great about. You're paying Larry Ogunjobi all that money. You don't want to bring him off the bench, but I would really strongly consider, next season, I would consider if I was the Steelers moving Benton to three tech, maybe letting Ogunjobi go for some cap release, or you can bring him off the bench if you want to negotiate some type of short-term extension, maybe get him on a lower salary figure, anything like that. But I would consider moving Benton to three tech, and then I would just go get a nose tackle that you can play on base downs. It doesn't necessarily have to be a world beater. Like these run-stopping nose tackles that can anchor in against double teams, like there's like two or three of them, I'll say, that are just floating around late in free agency every single offseason, and those guys could be signed for close to the vet min. Or you could just go spend some type of mid-round or day 3 draft pick for a guy who is a good run player and you could trust on base downs and really allow, Benton and maybe whoever else at 3 tech to kind of just get after the passer. Just move him into a spot that he's not going to be facing as many double teams as he is right now. So just my quick thoughts. Like I said, I don't necessarily think Benton's been bad. He hasn't had a bad season. It's just like in terms of my expectations of where I was hoping that we were going to be going. And maybe that was just a little bit ambitious on my part. I just don't think we've quite gotten really close to what I thought the level of play that he would provide. Just to kind of wrap up here, I just want to talk about some quick, and just lastly, just some real quick hitters on the trade deadline. Like I said, less than 24 hours away. I know this has been a hot button topic for quite some time, but just want to kind of talk through some brief thoughts on my preferences just on the available or maybe potentially available names, what they may cost. If you're a member to the channel, you guys know this already because I've done a film room breakdown for you guys. But Jakobi Meyers continues to be like my pipe dream type of ad at the deadline. They've already traded Devontae Adams, but the Raiders are 2-7. With a host of other teams, like they're very clearly tanking right now. They're basically in the race to the NFL draft. So Meyers, really a perfect fit for what they need. I think he's Z and inside slot capable. So he's a guy you can move around the formation. He could be pressed a little bit. Extremely reliable hands. Dude does his best work in the middle of the field, but can stretch the field. He can make contested catches for you as well. Scored 10 touchdowns last season with some really bad quarterback play, in my opinion. So I think that he would be the guy that I would probably want to go after the most just because he's 28. He's a guy who can help you both in the short term and the long term. He is on a really cheap contract for next year too. So he would be a guy that I would be willing to spend a little bit up for just because I think that you could go into the offseason next year, as long as Pickens, like his head's on straight and like you feel like you have a good handle on like him and what he provides for you on the outside. If you head into it with, Pickens, Myers, and then you've got kind of a rotation between Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, guys like that in the slot. Like I think that you can probably wait until maybe the middle rounds, like third round or something like that, to add another wide receiver to this room. And like you would feel pretty solid about it, or you can go get another veteran if that's what you want to do. But Myers continues to be the guy that I would add. Like in terms of what he could could cost. I think that the Raiders, I haven't seen his name like quote unquote available in some of these like Adam Schefter tweets and everything like that. But I think if like you called Vegas up and said like, hey, or settled on it, we'll say like, hey, give us Myers and a 5th round pick, we'll give you a third. That would give Vegas, 3 third-round picks. That gives them the necessary ammo that they need to go up and get whatever quarterback they're choosing in the draft, because like that's where they're going to be drafting. Like they're 100% going to take quarterback in this class that they're kind of missing out on one this past year. And I think that he absolutely has the talent and the type of play that warrants that type of compensation. And I think that would raise the ceiling on the offense the most, in my opinion, of all the names that I could potentially see being traded. Darius Slayton is another name. We get a good look at him on Monday Night Football. His whole game is pretty much predicated around stretching the field. He is a guy that can beat press coverage. That's something I really like about his game, like just in going through his targets and things like that. He's a guy who another 4.3 speed type of guy, can really, really run, man. Dude runs like a gazelle. He covers a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. Most of his work does come off, deep routes, goes, fades, the occasional post. And then also like he runs a lot of slants and things like that. He hasn't ever really played with a good deep ball passer. Daniel Jones, like I said in the pregame last week, of course, he did hit some really nice deep ball throws in this past game. But, he's never really played with a guy who can actually hit him in stride and take full advantage of his speed capabilities. Russell, just what we've seen so far, I think that he could potentially do that and would definitely be the best deep ball player or passer that Slayton's played with over the course of his career. So he'd be an intriguing add to me. I haven't watched as much film on Slayton. The only thing that I will note is like his drop rate for his career is like sky high. He's a guy who it's almost difficult to watch him try to catch the football because he just wants to catch everything with his body. And then his hands are just really inconsistent. He has some of the worst drops you'll ever see. But, he's definitely a boomer busty type player. But I think, when you get into the playoffs and think about like, okay, like what could a potential addition give us? Slayton's a guy who could go catch a couple 30-yard passes for you in a playoff game. And maybe that's the difference in you winning or losing in the first round of the playoffs. So he would be a guy also in terms of like what it would cost. I would think like a fourth, maybe a fifth round pick. Slayton is a free agency after the season. What could he get in terms of compensation for the Giants? I have absolutely no idea. I think that the Giants, if I was them, their season is also kind of like Vegas. It's over. They also need a quarterback. I would be trying to acquire as much ammunition as I possibly could. There are some other names that they're potentially dealing or dangling out on the market right now to acquire some new draft capital. I think a fourth or fifth round pick would probably do it, in my opinion. For 8 games of Slayton, you could get him in the offense and like see what it looks like. And then, if you like it, if you think he's like wide receiver 2, you like the way that he fits with this offense with Russ, opposite Pickens, maybe you sign him to a contract in the offseason. I don't think Slayton's necessarily a guy that's going to break the bank. But who knows? Like, again, like if he goes out there and he balls out the rest of the season, like you're going to be okay. If like he walks and prices himself out, if he gives you good production, you won't think twice about that day 3 pick that you gave up to potentially give yourself a better chance to win a playoff game. Those two guys necessarily, like I think that Myers is a very solid player. He's like honestly one of the more underrated players in the league at the receiver position, in my opinion. Him and Slayton are really the only two guys in this category that I think I would be really excited about. Like the other names that have been kind of thrown out that I'll kind of briefly touch on just because of how much they've been discussed. Mike Williams for the Jets. I think that the Steelers were really interested in signing Williams. Of course, the Jets kind of overpaid for him in free agency, gave him like a $10 million base salary. So if the Jets do trade him, like they're basically eating like $8 million of that salary, and the Steelers would end up paying very little for the rest of the season. He's on a 1-year deal as well. To me, when I've watched Williams play this year, a noticeable lack of burst. He doesn't necessarily quite look like he's 100% right now or 100% fully back from the season-ending ACL injury that he had last year. Those injuries just take a little bit. Williams is like coming up on 30 years old, I believe, too. So the recovery times always varies from player to player, but those guys typically don't look as good the year off of that injury. It's usually the next year after that they kind of, get their footing underneath them. So, but Williams does have like a long history and reputation as a contested catch guy. Like if you're talking about building this offense as like a, just a bunch of shots down the field, could Williams over the course of the season maybe start playing a little bit better as he gets more comfortable, as he feels better like physically, and come down with a couple of contested catches for you? Absolutely. Like he's another big body threat. I think these guys that, do schematically in theory kind of fit what Russ likes to do in terms of where he likes to attack on the boundary, outside the numbers, things like that. It's just for me, like I've watched the film, like he hasn't been getting open consistently enough for me to like really think that this would be really anything. I don't think that they would. I mean, probably a 6th round pick, maybe like a late day 3 pick swap in terms of like what I would imagine this would probably cost. And it really shouldn't be anything more than like a 6th, 7th round pick, to be honest with you. And then kind of the last thing that I really will talk about a little bit, just because I went back and watched this film over the weekend. Adam Thielen is a guy that the Steelers have been kind of linked to, maybe the most even like probable guy that they would target. To me, like this is the name that it's been thrown my way several times, so it's not like anything. I'm not breaking news or anything like that, but it's someone they've definitely been interested. I think that, Thielen, to me, of all the available names that they've like been rumored to, even dating back to like the spring, he probably makes like the least amount of sense. Not to say it isn't like a useful player at all. Thielen is very good against zone coverage, like understands how to consistently find the open voids in zones. He's a really reliable player underneath. He can adjust the throws off target. He just like, if you want a guy to sit there and get open like on 4, 5, 6 yard routes all day long, sitting in zone coverage, like he can still do that. But he is 34. He has 1 year left on his contract. I think next season he has like a $6-something million base salary. It's non-guaranteed. I don't really think anyone is going to trade for Thielen and then pay that money, but we'll see what it looks like. He did have over 1,000 yards last year, but you go back and like watch the tape, and it's just like a bunch of like unsuccessful plays, like them force feeding him the ball underneath and screens and things like that. The biggest thing is like he is 34 years old, so like he's definitely like lost a step or two. He can't really separate consistently versus man coverage. And if I was trading for somebody, I would kind of want somebody that can actually play on the outside. And I just think Thielen's role as he's gotten further into his career has been mostly shifted inside to the slot, because he is a really useful like security blanket type over the ball, over the middle. I'm just not really sure that that's the skill set that they really need, in my opinion. So I would prefer somebody that can actually do the things that this offense is kind of doing well, and also add another element of somebody that they can trust to beat man coverage. And I just don't think that he necessarily fills or fits those boxes or that criteria. So it's just my opinion. We'll see. Of course, as we kind of get into the next 24 hours or so, if the Steelers do make a deal, I will have some type of reaction video. And then maybe we'll see about diving into the film and posting some stuff, depending on who it is that they acquire. But that's another reason to turn on notifications. Make sure that you hit that bell, get notified whenever I go live and all that stuff. If you guys stuck with me through this long video, again, I really appreciate the continued support for the channel. Just on your way out, please make sure that you like, subscribe, hit that bell, drop me a comment. Let me know what you thought of the video. Anything that you guys, questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, drop those in the comments, and I'll try to read those and get back to you guys as quickly as I can. Like I said, just a reminder, I will be back on Tuesday or Wednesday to talk some NFL draft with a special guest. I'm really excited about that. So I hope to see you guys.